Greetings, YouTube. I don't know how many of you remember Mike Huckabee. He is an awful person and a bad Christian who ran for president, and whose daughter is currently lying for the president on a daily basis. She stands up in front of an entire group of reporters whenever there's a press conference and lies for the president. Stares him right in the eye and lies again and again and again. She is morally bankrupt, and her father, whose knee she was raised upon, is even more morally bankrupt. And I say more because he's not just a mouthpiece for a liar. He's working actively as an individual to undermine the liberties and human rights of our fellow Americans and people at large. What do I mean by that? I mean that Mike Huckabee thinks that essentially gay and trans people aren't people, and that if gay people and trans people have civil liberties and human rights, that is undermining the very fabric of American life. That it is the worst possible thing you can imagine to make sure that human rights and civil liberties are shared by all Americans equally. He's a homophobe and a transphobe. He is ugly. And he has violated one of Jesus' two instructions. Instruction 1, love your God. I got no idea if Mike Huckabee loves his God. I don't really care. But the second thing that that Jesus said was, love your neighbor. And well, I can tell you right now, Mike Huckabee doesn't love his neighbor. In case that wasn't clear. Because you see, if you love your neighbor, you don't worry about what sins they may be committing in private. You don't worry about what sins you think they're committing in their relationship. That's not your job. Your job is just to love them. And trans people and gay people just want to enjoy the same rights and privileges that cis people and straight people have always had. And that's not asking much. That's a really low bar. That's a like, you can barely squeeze single atomic structures below that bar. That's how low it is. Flat out. Making sure that gay people and trans people have the same civil liberties and human rights as everybody else should be self-evident. And if you look at our Constitution, and if you look at past legal stances, for example, the civil liberty movement of the 1960s, it should be really clear that this should have already happened. But there are people like Mike Huckabee in opposition to it, because he's decided that his particular worldview, which he takes from a particular stance from the Bible, which Jesus probably would have laughed at, his view is your view. And if you don't like his view being imposed upon you, too damn bad. And that's why he's morally bankrupt. If he wants to follow an archaic set of rules and ignore the two that Jesus gave him, he can. But when he tries to impose those on the world at large, that's where he crosses the line into moral bankruptcy, particularly if he's attempting to use secular laws, our secular legal system, to achieve that end. Social conservatism is a disease, and the greatest risk there is to our species at the moment. And Mike Huckabee is out there on the front lines every goddamn day, doing what he can to undermine the civil liberties and human rights of his fellow Americans. That makes him a morally bankrupt human being and a bad Christian.